That'll be our 1 year.
Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
For the Halloween special. That'd be great.
As I remember, that was a pretty darn good Halloween show.
Oh, man.
So if people haven't seen that or heard that, I highly recommend that because I think we got into things that you're not going to find anywhere else.
We definitely did. It's the most downloaded podcast
Is
out
it?
of all our episodes. Yep. Welcome back, everybody, to the Sabbath at Midnight, along here with my co-host Dominic. And again, we have a returning guest, one of my favorite guests, Gary Wayne. And today we're going to be discussing the sons of God, the fallen angels, pretty much, the Nephilim, and even into detail of the lion men of Moab. Is that how you say it, Moab?
Hey, Diane, good to see you.
So it's exactly what it sounds like. They're like these lion head humanoids. But anyways, without further ado, Gary Wayne, go ahead and introduce yourself again and tell us about, where to get your book at and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me back to your podcast. I'm so happy to be back with you guys again, and I'm back home at my home in Vancouver, which is always good. I like to go to the lake for the summer, but I also like to get back to my home. So, for people who may not be aware of me, my name is Gary Wayne. I wrote a book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy: How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind. And I have a website if you like what I'm talking about and you want to hear more about the book or you want to purchase a book or get a hold of me, you can go to my website, the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's the number 6conspiracy.com. And on that page, there's a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters. And on the on the media page on the website, if you want to get a hold of me, where it says contact Gary Wayne for an interview, click on that. And that's my email address, genesis6conspiracy@gmail.com, genesis6conspiracy@gmail.com. And that will come right through to me. It might take me a couple, 3 months to get back to you, but I will get back to you. And
as long as you get back to them.
If you're wanting to get a signed copy, then you just go over to the Buy Now page and you can order through the website there, where you can, if you're in Canada, you go to the Canada page. If you're in the US, you go to the US page. If you're into anywhere else in the world, Europe, Australia, South America, wherever, there's an overseas page, so you can click there to get a signed copy. If you want to look at buying from Amazon, you can link right over from the website page to Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, and BarnesandNoble.com, and you can also link over to get the digital version if you're wanting that as well. So that's the easiest, best way to get a hold of my book. My new book that we'll talk a little bit later on in the show will also be available on that website. I've got my website man working on it, or starting to work on the website. So we'll get a more visible contact the author button on there, I hope. And we'll be putting up all 84 chapters of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2 with generous excerpts and pictures again. And it'll be available off the same website, complete with bundle pricing if you're wanting to buy multiple books, as in one of each or multiple of the same. It's doesn't really matter. It's just however you want to buy it. You can buy it single, you can buy it multiples, but I'll have bundle pricing available for everybody on that. So lots of things going on. Hoping to have the new book out in October or November. And I'm in the typeset stage of the editing right now, and I'm hoping.
This is only 6 days old. I thought he released his book last year. This might be an old video just uploaded, though.
Going to turn that around here by the middle of next week so we can stay on an October delivery date.
Amen to that. I can't wait for that book to come out. And really quick, Gary Wayne, just so you know, you were our first guest last year in October. So that'll be pretty cool if your book comes out next month. That'll be our 1 year anniversary, and you were our first guest for the Halloween special that we did. Mm-hmm. That'd be great.
Yeah, as I remember, that was a pretty darn good Halloween show.
Oh, man.
So if people haven't seen that or heard that, I highly recommend that because I think we got into things that you're not
Oh,
going to
yeah.
find anywhere else.
We definitely did. It's the most
Sounds
downloaded
interesting.
podcast
Is
out of
it?
all our episodes. Yep. And yeah, it's the first one. It will have more, but there's other episodes that climbed, above other episodes. But that one is still the number one. It has over 1,000 downloads.
Wow.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. And I encourage people out there who haven't gotten Gary's first book to get that and read it. It's got a lot of information on it in it. It's very, very good. Very well detailed with citations and all the other good stuff that goes on with the scholarly type of written book. It was great, Gary. I still reference your book a lot for some of my shows. I have to.
Well, it does cover a lot of information. And one thing that I've done differently in the new book is I've moved it from endnotes to footnotes so that when you're reading the page, you're going to have a footnote on the same page with all the information. And I put more information in the footnotes and got definitions and all sorts of other things that sort of go on that. I didn't want to sort of get down too many rabbit trails within the text of the narrative.
Right.
So I think one of the things that I did well, I liked what we got. I get a lot of good feedback on it. Is that I put all my sources in there. Now I'm going to make those sources more accessible, and I'm going to give you more information on those sources, and more information within the footnotes. And where in the first book, I used a lot of sources that I was using that were not of the Christian belief. I wanted to.
Diane, that link, and I want you to subscribe before you can read it. So I read the headline, but then the thing come up where I had to subscribe.
Them to talk in their own words and not manipulate what they were saying. I go directly to the sources this time. And so that bank of knowledge will be very helpful for most people's libraries for research and reference.
Absolutely. It's timeless. So tonight's show,
I haven't done a Gary Wayne one for a long time, and I don't even know what the Lion Men of Moab's about, so this should be interesting.
let's jump into the first topic.
How are we going to do this? We're going to start off with the sons of God.
Sons of God.
B'nai Elohim, Genesis.
Who are the sons of God? How far back do they go? What's the classifications of them? Some say have wings. Some say they don't have wings. Some say there are space brothers or the Alter Ray. Some say there are siblings. And Gary, for me, when I hear stuff like that, it's okay. Well, what does the Bible say about that? Are they? Because I look at it as, from a scientific aspect, I look at it. Are they genetically the same as us right now in our present state? Are they technically our genetic brothers? If they went out and made it with women and had giants, I don't think.
Well,
we don't do that. We don't make with a woman have a 20-footer.
Two evil people don't make a giant, you know what I mean? As the set theory would be. But yeah, there's definitely a genetic altercation that happens in there that causes.
Yeah, because 200 of the fallen angels, they went out and had sex with animals. That's how you get centaurs and minotaurs and all that, because the fallen angels had sex with animals. What perverts.
Them to grow way too big.
Take it away, Gary. You're the man.
Well, it's such a great question, and it's actually quite a large subject and a lot larger than most people think, and certainly a lot larger than most Christians think, because this isn't really taught in the churches. Just as all of prehistory and prophecy, they're not really taught in the.
Trace, I was talking to Gabe about Discord last night. I let her know Skype's not going out. So there's no problem. I'm just being lazy. But she can download it and I can get on and find Misfits for Jesus. I'll do that today. I'll do that when I hang up.
In the churches, the whole context of the Bible isn't taught. A lot of good things are taught, but it's taught without the context of angels and how much information that we actually have on them. There is a lot. And they're not to be worshipped or venerated or anything like that. But we need to know about them because there are a number of them. And some people would say there was at least 33 million or 50 million that rebelled or will have rebelled, because in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, we're told the number is 10,000 times 10,000, which is 100 million of angels that are before the
Runs
throne.
out.
So depending on how you want to calculate that third, there's 33 or 50 million, or maybe it's even more. Maybe that's more of a
It's the 31st.
allegorical number than an accurate number. I read it as literal, but it could be more because other places in the Bible we're going to be told that they are uncountable. They're like the stars in the sky. They're typically, stars is one of the allegories for an angel. So, and so there's a lot who are working against us, and they're part of that whole organizational structure with the Council of the Gods in Psalms 82 that rules over the nations in Deuteronomy 32. And these are, the council of the gods that rule until the end time. And so these are the rebellious ones, and we live in their world. We live in their legal-based oath.
Trace, I'll definitely do that Discord, because if I don't and they take my channel down for a strike or whatever, I won't be able to let you know where my new channel is. So that's one of the reasons I do it. Plus, Diane posts some mad links on her misfits.
Based system that they have imposed over us. So it's important to understand this context, and that there was a rebellion, and the Adamites, in my opinion, are the solution and the resolution to the angelic rebellion.
Them transgenders in the army, they should be locked up. They shouldn't be allowed to just walk around being soldiers. What are the men dressing women's uniform? Is it that bad?
And so we're intimately connected with them. So we need to know more about them, and we need to dig deeper. And so, yeah, there's a fair bit of information in there, and there's many different orders of these angels. So there's not just, one kind of angel, and they have a rank and an order. So there's a Hebrew word called.
Okay, I wonder if Gary's going to tell us if the angels have wings or not. Because it's got to be angels with wings, surely. Abba,
which means, and as it's translated into the King James Version Bible, as the host of heaven. There's a host of rebellious ones, and that word host means an army of angels, and rank and orders of angels. So I think the first place to begin with is, once we know that, is we need to sort of define them. Are they physical or are they spiritual? And angels are spiritual from the heavenly realm. Right. They're not of the physical realm. So you might say they are alien to the physical world because they are from another dimension.
Amen.
And even the ones that rebelled, their heaven is not the heaven of God. It is the heaven that's below. It's the heaven that's in the earth in another dimension that they would call the other world, the underworld. And with 1,000 different names, biblically, we would understand that as Sheol and as Hades. And that they have the ability to come through those portals and into this physical world. So they are spiritual beings. They are the invisible ones that is talked about in the New Testament, just as the disembodied spirits of their offspring are invisible ones that we would know as.
Okay, he's saying the fallen angels are just spirits. Well, how did they get the women pregnant? I wonder I hope he explains that.
Demons. And demons are the ones that Jesus is dealing with in the New Testament.
Like, I know how he gets a deposit. I know how he gets them pregnant, but how's that actually work?
Of up to 30% of your home cost from your super, and cap interest rates at 3%. Conquer every road.
When he's dealing with the devils, and used in conjunction with devils as unclean spirit and evil spirit. And I'm not here today to talk about the demons, but just so that you know, they're part of the invisible.
Diane, can I pay in wasps?
Invisible ones, because these are the disembodied spirits of the giants. So if you understand that angels are spirit beings, and that they can enter into this world as a spirit being, it doesn't answer the question as to how they're able to create offspring
Mhm.
sexually, as
Okay,
is
good.
described in Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, and described all around the world in all cultures around the world on all continents, except for maybe Antarctica. Who knows what we'll find down there?
Yeah.
That something else has to be going on, or they use some sort of technology. But I tend to read the Bible literally, and I understand where the allegories are and the similes, and those are always defined within the Bible. So we have the sons of God that are mating with human females to create giants. You see that superlative sort of nature or being that can all of a sudden create these kinds of giants. So they can take a physical.
Okay. I wonder if there was any homo fallen angels that just went from men. Gee, that's a good question.
Form. And they have this changeling quality, the ability to take any form that they want, any gender that they want. And so that's partly where the changeling understanding of the occult comes from. So, like in, let's say, Greek mythology, for example, Zeus turned into a wolf. And in doing so, in one of those incarnations as a wolf, you create the werewolf mythology or history of changing King Lycaon's family all into werewolves.
Mm-hmm.
So we get these accounts all around the world. But biblically, we understand they can take a physical form too. And we see angels. And
there's a couple, Diane, Myanmar, they got a lot of people dead. And also the Solomon Islands got hit with an earthquake as well. They're roughly in the same area. It was probably the same earthquake. It was a 7.1, if I remember.
All different kinds of forms throughout the Bible, but it's the physical one that most Christians sort of get hung up on. And I think they ought to be that detailed, that they want to know how a spirit being can create offspring with a physical being. So we know they can take a human form because two angels.
I've never heard this answered. So he's so clever, this guy. I've never heard the question asked, actually.
Show up as men, first thought to be men, and then understood as angels, with the pre-existent Jesus who goes in to meet with Abraham just before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so these two, along with the angel of the Lord, Jehovah the Elohim, you have individuals that angelic beings that take a form of a man, and they can drink, they can eat, they can touch and shake hands, they can do everything physically. So they can manifest that somehow, some way. They have that ability to do that. And then when you get into the Sodom and Gomorrah destruction, which follows immediately after this encounter, you have the two angels that show up at Sodom, and they're recognized as men and angels, and they want to have sex with them. So whether or not it's them wanting to have homosexual sex, they want them to switch their gender, or they want their daughters to.
Hang on, let's hear that again. Were they homos?
Follows immediately after this encounter. You have the two angels that.
Of course, there's Sodom and Gomorrah. They'd be ruled by fallen angels, of course.
Show up at Sodom, and they're recognized as men and angels, and they want to have sex with them. So whether or not it's them wanting to have homosexual sex, they want them to switch their gender, or they want their daughters to have sex with them. We're not told, but we know men and all the people of Sodom showed up. Mm-hmm. So there was many people, probably many genders. Well, two genders. I shouldn't. I don't want to fall into that.
Don't get on that rabbit hole right now.
I apologize sincerely.
You're gonna get crucified right now.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. So, anyways, so we get that encounter, and we get other encounters of angels showing up and looking like men throughout the Bible. But the most important one, I think, that maybe will resonate with Christians is that in the book of Hebrews, it clearly tells us that you should be
Mm.
kind to strangers, because you never know when you're going to be interacting with an angel.
So
And that
true.
means they can take a physical form.
Gary,
Just
really
like
quick, I just want to say, just say something. When you say all the people wanted to have sex with the two angels, wouldn't it be these two angels look different from everybody else if they recognized them immediately? They had to look different, right? From
Yeah,
everybody
they're
else.
called men, but they are recognized as angels. So it could be at that point in time, because they were going in as judges, they were maybe
Dressed different,
Jill,
look different.
dressed differently, or shining, or something about them had
Oh, wow.
indicated that they knew that they were.
Yeah, Diane, egg prices have dropped, so they're taking them off the shelf. You posted something about yesterday the eggs were back to normal, didn't you?
Angels, or maybe there was some spies
Yeah.
that had reported that.
Yeah, that always blew my mind. It's like
Yeah.
immediately they knew these two people were angels. Either they were, like you said, or they were really tall, muscular, good-looking guys. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep. Or maybe they're fallen angels that they worship to. Maybe they informed them or something.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe.
however it happens, they recognize them as soon as they come into the city. So obviously, there's a piece of information as to why that we don't have there. But the important thing is that they can take this physical form. And they can look like men. Sometimes they can be recognized as men. Sometimes they can't be. So they would have had the ability to make whatever that adjustment was, and they were coming there to judge the city. So one might think that the answer would be more that they decided to make it clear that they are angels in men form, and whatever format that was that made them recognizable. So it's important to understand then that somehow they can take a physical form. And if that's the case, then biblically we probably should have something within the Bible that's just how that can happen, other than they are just very, very powerful. That's part of their gifts to be able to do it. So in the book of Jude, in 1:6, talks to us about the fallen angels that left their habitation.
What's that mean?
And that word habitation is one of the keys to understanding how they take a physical form. And that's the Greek word oikaterion.
What?
And what it means is a dwelling place.
Is the actual word oikaterion? Wow.
For the spirit. So they left their oikaterion, their habitation of heaven, their first origin. And they left that in a manner where they're not coming back. In this case, although loyal angels would be able to change into a physical form and still come back. So what's important to understand here is that this word oikaterion is used one other time in the New Testament, with the New Testament originally being in Greek. So we go into 2 Corinthians 5:2, and it's talking about the house in heaven. In 2 Corinthians 5:2, for people who might have missed that. And that's the Greek word oikaterion. And this house in heaven is the place that we as humans are groaning for as followers of God and Jesus. And that this will be a home for us, or a dwelling place for our spirit when we go to heaven after the resurrection. And so when we look at how that sort of makes...
Diane, it'd be good to invest in gold, wouldn't it? Because if they're doing this BRICS thing and all that, gold's going to really hit the roof. I'd do that, but I don't know a trader I could trust. I wouldn't know if I'm getting ripped off or not. Otherwise, I'd invest.
Some sense to us is that this oikaterion reflects our nature in this physical world that we have a heavenly oikoterion, which is a dwelling place for the spirit that God provided us from heaven. And this oikoterion is the
Okay, oikoterion, that doesn't even sound Greek. It doesn't sound like it's from any language. That's the weirdest word I've ever heard used in the Bible, oikoterion.
soul and the body. So one needs to sort of understand that the soul and the body is the oikoterion of the physical world, and it's where the spirit moves into the soul, and which is in the body, and merges with the soul. So the soul and the body is from the physical world. The spirit, even with humans, comes from heaven. So we have that oikoterion. So what the angels are able to do is they're able to create a soul in the physical world and a body. And
this is Joel at work. This is Joel at work. Whoa.
Where'd they?
Inside the phone, Joel. Snap and track expenses with Solo by MYOB from $12 for 12 months.
Our competence pretty much every box there is. They don't settle for anything less than full immersion into the Brazilian South American experience. Waiting.
To celebrate the new SPC Minecraft range, SPC is giving away a share of 1.5
possess that oikoterion so that they can physically interact in the world. So if we understand that, and that we've seen witness now with the examples that I provided within the Bible, then we can start to understand that if you are going to create a physical body, then you have the ability to create DNA. And if you're creating DNA, whatever you put into that DNA as the body that they're creating, that is the genes and the DNA that are going to be passed on to the spirit's offspring. So now they're physical, they can create the ability to produce with human females, and one presumes that, and certainly we get these accounts in polytheism, as in the Sumerian tradition and the Greek tradition and others, where you have goddesses, which is that female version of an angel taking a different gender, who mate with humans, in this case human males, to create a giant, just as Lugalbanda, king of Uruk.
Guys, I worked in a chicken place at Emu Plains Jail, and when they do a kill, like they kill 12,000 chickens at once in the 2 days or so. I didn't know this, but when it sounds gross, but when you're gutting the chicken, there's like 5 eggs in its body. It's not just one egg pops out every day. There's 4 or 5 eggs behind it, smaller. So yeah, that was interesting. I didn't know that.
Is the father of Gilgamesh, and Nin, the fertility goddess, is the female, and Enkidu is created in the same way. And they're 2/3 God and 1/3 human. So these are demigods. So that gets us into this kind of understanding of is, well, so what do angels look like? So
typo with Yakia. Haven't done that for a while, Talia.
We would probably get a better idea as to what the giants looked like, which are their spirits or their illegitimate offspring. It's a violation of the laws of creation. And so it's important that we know that this is not permitted by God, but that doesn't mean, in terms of the law, but that does not mean that the angels didn't have free choice to break the law, at least for a time. Certainly before the flood, seems likely again after the flood for a short time to create these kinds of giants. But if they passed on the DNA of what they look like, then their offspring would look like them. And it's a significant sort of concept. So I want to also talk about the connection in the Old Testament when we talk about the sons of God that are angels in Genesis 6. How do we know these are angels?
Right.
Well, that word sons of God is used more than once in the Old Testament. And so we get the sons of God that are talked about in Job 1:6 and 2:1 when they go to present themselves. And as the book of Enoch talks about, angels have to present themselves at a specific time. And it also talks about in the book of Enoch that when they didn't report, that was the beginning to the larger rebellion, when deduces Satan would have rebelled sooner, but then you have a larger rebellion. And these are the sons of God in the book of Enoch that are going to produce the giants, the Nephilim, which is the Hebrew word for giant. And they're called watchers as well as sons of God in the book of Enoch. And understanding that the sons of God are angels is very, very important, and understood from another passage in the Old Testament is Psalms 82 that we talked about earlier, where you have the mighty, the council of the mighty, which is the Hebrew word.
Shawnee, very weird word for Greek, oikotarian. It doesn't even sound like any language. Go. Oh, damn. Remote. Hang on. Oh, man. Should be working now.
El. So this is the council of the gods. And just as we see that spelled out,
good question,
God
Talia.
as well, which goes back to El, as in angel or a god, and that these are the sons of the God Most High. So same understanding. So when you have sons of God, that's Ha Ben Elohim, the sons of God, and this would be sons of the Most High, which is God, the Bible, Elohim, in the superlative nature, another name for him. And it is Ha Bene Elion. So it's the same understanding that these are the sons of God. We know that they're part of a series of names that are referenced as angel as a specific order, angels as a generic name for angels in the Old Testament, and for the sons of God, in this case, being part of the angels, also as the host and also as stars. And in the Old Testament, they're used kind of interchangeably together. So that, for example, in Psalms 148:1, or 148:1 and 2, it's talking about praising God from the heavens, just as in in Job 38:4-7, you have the morning stars and the sons of God who are praising and dancing with God's creation of the universe. So they're there at creation, and only the angels are there at creation. So clearly, sons of God and morning stars, which is another order of stars or of angels, were dancing and praising God at that time. But Psalms 148, it says, "Praise ye him, all his angels, pray ye him, all his hosts." So now we have angels and hosts used together, just as we had stars and sons of God used together in Job. And then what's also interesting, and I won't go through all the passages, I just want to sort of make some connections here. In Daniel 8:10, which is the passage where Antichrist in the end time is going to enter into heaven along with the other angels, it talks about the stars as part of the host of heaven. So in the passage in 8:10 says, "And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host of the stars and stamped them upon the earth." So the stars are angels like the sons of God in the book of Job, in Job 38.
There's been footage of stars morphing, like turning inside out and making patterns. They're not a solid body like the moon. They're not a solid body like we think. And they actually give off megahertz. They actually do some sort of sound vibration.
The stars are what angels are called, and the angels are the host, and so are the stars part of the host, and they're all part of this Saba army rank and order of angels. And so,
hey, Lynn, good to
we
see you.
understand that the idea that these were Sethites, that's
Yeah.
not possible,
Yeah,
because they couldn't create something not only larger, but also with super preternatural gifts. Some people might say that, in the Old Testament, Israel is called the sons of God. But that's in both of those passages. One of them's in the book of Hosea. And if people,
Guys, Lynn's been having a lot of trouble with her health. Can you say some prayers for her, please?
want to get a hold of me, I have a great document on how we know the angels are sons of God. I walked through all of it. But even in the book of Isaiah, where it talks about that, this is a prophecy of the second Exodus that happens in the last 3.5 years. It's a future event where Israel is going to be talked about being sons of God. This is after they've accepted their Messiah, Jesus, after many of the resurrections have already happened. At the time of Jacob's trouble, at the time of trouble in Daniel 12, and the resurrections for them, for some to everlasting life and some to death as well, as talked about in Daniel 12. This is the time of Ezekiel 37, where you have the dry bones rising up, and all of Israel being marched to them, the lost tribes who will awaken in Judah, and they'll all join together for this reconciliation back into the Holy Covenant in time for the Supper of the Lamb. And so when we look at what all of this is telling us is that not only are the people of Israel not the sons of God, neither are the sons of God in the New Testament. The sons of God is a prophetic sons of God when we're going to be adopted.
Thank you.
Through the resurrection, to be like angels after the resurrection that was cemented at the Pentecost with that promise, so that we can be like gods and adopted by Jesus as our brother, who also was resurrected. So we resurrected with the same kind of body, but that has nothing to do with what happened in the past. And what it's actually doing is it's talking about the veracity of who the original sons of God are, because we will be like those angels.
Thank you, Gary. A lot of people don't get that.
Yeah.
They confuse who we are now with.
Shawnee, she's very ill in hospital. Lord, we're going to say a prayer. We're going to say a prayer for Lynn. Her health's really bad, and we'd like you to step in and do your thing, Lord. She's one of your children. She loves you very much. So can you please step in and comfort her at least, or do what you do, Lord? Amen.
With the angels that we're like them. They're our space brothers. They're the elder race, and it's just, I don't know where they get this stuff from, but when you just look at the word "like," the Bible says we'll be like the angels. It says having the same characteristics or qualities as, similar to, quote, unquote. So it's kind of like a basketball and a football. They're both balls, right? But they're not the same. They weren't created the same. Angels were created by God. We were created from a man and a woman. And like you were saying previously, that you were defining, what this really means, that the word sons of God. And I really appreciate that for you.
Because you got back home, Lynn.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're able to go back and give accurate passages that are not in conflict with anything else in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And that's really the key that you want to be able to do. Anybody can sort of take one passage and take it out of context.
Well, yeah, Gary. I mean, there's some speakers out there that say that because they said the angels are extraterrestrials and they're our brothers.
No.
And I'm just like, wow.
If the ETs were legit on our side, why all this clandestine behaviour? It just doesn't rub right.
So by saying that, by that reasoning, if they're extraterrestrials, that means God's extraterrestrial. That means we're extraterrestrial. So we're back to ancient aliens part 2.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just crazy. It's it's wild out there, even in these Christian circles. And you get these speakers talking about this stuff. I'm like, man, where'd they get this stuff from? I just don't understand it.
Amen, Shawnee.
You'd have to agree that's the perfect metaphor, Chief, for how Budget Direct can help you through the tightest of spots.
Insurance sold with Budget Direct.
The virus that causes shingles is sleeping, lying dormant in nearly all adults aged 50 and over. Think you're not at risk of shingles? It's time to wake up, because shingles could wake up in you. Speak to your healthcare professional about shingles and how you can help protect yourself today.
Well, they get a lot of it from the churches. Because again, the churches don't want to deal with this in a manner that they have to deal with the other questions that then would come along with it.
Yeah.
And so, and the thing is, they're not even prepared to talk about it because they're not taught about this in seminary schools. So they have no ability to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And what happens is typically if you want to push the questions on this, then you're going to be told to stop asking those questions or you'll be asked to leave the church.
Right.
And that's not an answer.
No,
I mean, that is something that should raise a red flag, but you shouldn't necessarily think that they might be Gnostic or anything like that. But what it should tell you is that they're not as knowledgeable on the whole Bible. And that means you're going to need to dig deeper into the Bible yourself.
Right. So true. So true. And you were finishing up on.
I also have a question really quick, Gary. So, because this is something that I've been trying to understand. How did the giants mate with the women? Not the fallen angels, but there are stories. I mean, maybe not.
Because I don't mean to sound rude, but these giants, they would have massive penises as well. So how would that work with human women?
Bible, but there are other non-biblical stories in history where the giants mate with women. I mean, without me, getting too much detail, it sounds physically impossible.
Yeah, it does.
Maybe they did it when they were young, before they got too big, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an obstacle, but it's kind of sort of shown in some of the reliefs and things that come out of the Middle East and elsewhere. So I think with before the flood, that the Nephilim didn't seem to have a fertility issue.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they didn't mate with humans. They probably did, and they probably would have done it in the same way as the post-Diluvian Rephaim. If people aren't familiar with Rephaim, that's the word that's used for giant 25 times in the Old Testament, where Nephilim is only used 3 times in the original Hebrew. And so there's a distinction between the
Rephaim are sons of the Nephilim. That's why.
Nephilim, and it's the Rephaim that we're dealing with after the flood. And the only other 2 times Nephilim is named as a giant when it's calling in the embellished part of the report in Numbers 13:33. It's used twice where the Anakim are the sons of giants, which is the Hebrew word Nephil, and Nephilim is the male plural. The Anakim or Rephaim, as they're described in Deuteronomy 2, giants in that application, as with the Emine and Horim and the other giants that are mentioned there, goes back to Rapha and Rephaim as the male plural. So after the flood, though, these giants have fertility issue. And that shows up in the word terrible ones that we see in Ezekiel 32 as sort of the best example, although it will also show up in other passages like Isaiah 25 in the first 10 verses. And I really, you want to start to get your head rolling on some things, read Ezekiel 32, then read Isaiah 25. And it's also mentioned as the terrible ones in Isaiah 14 as well. And that's a loaded passage as well. It's part of a dual prophecy that begins in Isaiah 13. And in that understanding of terrible ones, that is like Nephilim is I am is the plural, and the I am means ones and is the plural. So they're like the giant ones, just as
We think we're scared of them because they're the giant ones and they got all the power. But in America, they found a tablet. I'm not sure where I got this info, but where I got it from, it sounded pretty legit. It said that the giants in them caves in America that the Indians are hunting, it said that freaking hell, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry guys. I just completely lost my train of thought.
the seraphim are the serpent-faced ones that Isaiah 6 talks about. Seraph, seraphim, they had serpent faces. They're six-winged dragons, heavenly dragons, so to speak. And so when we look at the terrible ones, that's the Hebrew word erit. And you put on the I am and you get the eritim. So that would be the true sort of plural form of the terrible ones that are being talked about in those passages. And so in the definition of the terrible ones, the eritim, you have many descriptions that are going to describe a giant like being stout or wide and strong and words like that, but also childless and fertility issues. And it seems to have shown up with not that they couldn't produce the seed to do it, it's that they weren't producing enough females to continue to produce. So we're going to see more of this after the flood is the point because of that fertility issue. They needed to find a way lest they went extinct. And so they had.
Oh, that's what I was trying to tell you about the cave in America. They found something, I don't know what it was, on a piece of stone or whatever, and it said they were hiding from Joshua's robbers. So the Nephilim that escaped to America saw themselves as the victims because they said that. I wish I remembered where I saw that, but it come from a good source or I wouldn't have repeated it.
To create the hybrids, hybrid Rephaim humans that weren't as tall. They're called the Shazu in the execration text, the Amu and the Shamau in more of the Mesopotamian references to them. They were 7 to 9 feet tall, whereas the giants were 10 to, let's say, 19 feet tall if you take the height of Gilgamesh after the flood as being almost 19 feet. And of course, they had a 2-to-1 height to width ratio. So that's why when you get the reference of Og's bed at 9 cubits, and he was the king of Uruk, so it'd be 21-inch cubit versus an 18. And just as Josephus says, you need to measure the giants on a royal cubit because they're all kings and royals. He would have had a bed that's almost 16 feet tall. And
tell you, there's a lot of stories about the American Indians. They trapped them in a cave and burned them down and all that. But somewhere in all that, there was a tablet or a scroll found where they said they were escaping Joshua's robbers, the robber Joshua. So like I said, they saw themselves, they probably see themselves as a victim with the fall as well. Oh, God's unreasonable, he kicked us out. I bet they think that.
It was 4 cubits wide, so 7 feet wide. So he would have been a little bit smaller than that, so smaller than Gilgamesh, but let's say 13, 14, 15 feet tall. And he would have had about let's say 6 feet wide at the max to fit in the bed, and or 5 feet wide. So he would have been very close to that same 2-to-1 height to width ratio that the cubits are talking about. And that was a standard that they left for people to understand that these weren't just normal humans. It was there to be on display.
Lynn, mine was a pressure break as well. I slipped in the kitchen and landed flat on my tailbone, and it squashed my spine where the you get them little things come off your spine, them little twigs. Well, my nerves got caught up in that, and I suffered sciatica, and that's how they worked out what happened. I've never had any pain worse than sciatica. It was agony.
At Rabbah after the defeat of Sihon and Og, so all the generations would remember. They would also put bones on display, according to Josephus.
I was about to say that.
They were unlike humans in any sort of manner because they would have to be to support that kind of weight. They were something completely different. So we know that they created these hybrids, and they show up as the patriarchless 9 tribes of Canaan. Canaan is a patriarch in the 70 nations. Heth is Suicidon, but the 9 patriarchs for the rest of the families, which goes back to the Hebrew word that says essentially family, but also, and more accurately, I think, different race, different kind, different species of people were the patriarchs. And Rephaim patriarchs aren't listed in the table of nations, just like Arba, the patriarch, as the book of Joshua talks about, for the Anakim isn't listed in the table of nations, and neither is Rapha, the patriarch for the Rephaim tribe that is living in the Mount Hermon area that's recorded in the War of Giants in Genesis 14, and in the land that's being given to Abraham in Genesis 15. The Rephaim are listed amongst what I call the mighty 10 of that time versus the mighty 7 that are listed in the time of the book of Exodus. So they had to find a way to do it, and the Bible shows us that they did. And we also get a marriage in Genesis 36 between Timnah, a Horim, son of Seir, which goes back to the Hebrew word satir, and Eliphaz, son of Esau, to create the hybrid Amalekite race. But typically,
when we're dealing with something that's commercially sensitive, we need to control who has access to our documents. With Adobe Acrobat, we can easily encrypt our PDFs with passwords and keep documents for your eyes only.
The all-new Deliver 7 from just $42,490. Drive away for 80 Hondas. LDV. Bring it on.
Stop pretending you don't have leg pain and try Revitive. Revitive boosts circulation to help relieve leg aches and pain.
You would, if they had a fertility issue with the women, not many would be reproducing with humankind because they would want to preserve more of the bloodline. So what's going to be happening is you're going to have the males reproducing with the females of the Canaanites and others who would have intermarried with the giants. So now we get back to the question is those giants, even though they're smaller than the Nephilim, they're probably still too large to have sex without killing the mother.
Yes.
Or the babies being born without killing the mother. Well,
okay, but the giants did go after the women because they had lust for them. So they're not just going to do in vitro fertilization. They actually want the goods that go with having lust. So I wonder, how's he going to explain this? How did the giants, with the huge, how do they sleep with women, let alone get them pregnant?
Before the flood, when the babies were born, according to the Keber Nagast of the Old Testament, the Ethiopian copy, and other sources, the mothers died. And they did a cesarean type of birth to do that. But how they actually did the act seems to be more closely associated with what we see on those reliefs. And a lot of those fertility rituals is you have these depictions of these giants, and some people say they're gods, but I think they're giants because the angels could take a smaller size if they wanted to, but wouldn't help in the birth of them. But what they do in these reliefs is that they're pouring semen into the women.
That's wild.
And that seemingly is how they did it, and they did it in a ritual act. We also know that the Rephaim had a fertility issue in the Ugaritic text, which is a very good source for having a parallel account of so much of what is talked about the Rephaim and in the time of the Exodus and before. And in there you have the Raphayu, and RPM is the Semitic root word for Rephaim. And it produces the transliterated translations that we see, Raphayu and Raphaim, for the Rephaim in the Ugaritic text, who worship Baal and Ashtaroth, who they accredit with creating them after the flood. And that they are having a fertility issue. So at some point in time, Baal and Ashtaroth and all the ones who would have created these crimes after the flood of creating giants, violations against the laws of creation, would have went to the abyss, just like the parent gods did. The parent god of Baal was El, who he overthrew. I don't think he overthrew him. El just went to the abyss before the flood for his illicit crimes, and he's was notorious in outside biblical accounts of not only being a horrible tyrant god, but for creating giants. And so they're doing fertility rituals to somehow bring Baal and the Baalim back.
Go ahead.
To create more Rephaim demigods because they're going extinct. And I think that's what drives them into reproducing with humans, and probably through transplanting their semen into women, because it would have taken, I think, another hybrid to been able to continue to do this, right? So once they get into the second and third and fourth generations, then they're probably just reproducing with hybrid Rephaim and humans after that.
Oh, good.
I just wanted to get that down because I've heard stories.
Okay, he explained that rather well, and I agree with his thesis.
First, about the Native Americans, how they would say their women would get taken and they'll get raped to death, and there's also some stories in the conquistadors where they would try to do the same thing to the women, but at some point these things are being born, so they're getting it done some way. Have you ever
but also consider that, I mean, that would be happening because they didn't have respect for humans.
Yeah.
So, and they may have been doing that in rituals, and they didn't care whether the woman died at that point, right? But if they wanted to reproduce and them to have the baby, whether or not they survived after that, they would have to find a way to keep her alive.
Yeah. I was going to say, have you ever read a book called The Mysteries of Solomon Island?
Lot of giants there.
I'm trying to, it's familiar, but.
And that's a coincidence. I mentioned Solomon Islands as soon as I started streaming. Didn't I, Di? Because I mentioned the earthquake that was there. So that's a coincidence.
It's not ringing a bell as to what it was about, but the name is very familiar.
Pretty much, long story short, it's supposed to be based on a true story. A guy went out there, did some research, and supposedly met a giant, and just to get to the subject that I'm talking about in the book, he described that some of these giants, they would mate with the human females when they were like 13, 14 before they got too big. Apparently these giants were about 12 to 15 feet tall, but when they were like, in ages between, 10 and 15, they were about 6 foot, 7 foot. They were still at the size where they can mate with human females. But
so right after they went through puberty.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, so we actually got an account of it. That's fascinating.
Gotcha.
What happened then?
Yeah, if they go through puberty.
Yeah, exactly.
I just, it's just interesting, I mean, it's people are like, why are you asking that? Well, it's interesting. I want to know what happened.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because if we're saying that they reproduce with women, how?
Yeah, exactly.
And to me, that's a legitimate question. Those are the types of questions I ask on anything. So, and that's why I, did so much research on this, because I just don't want to accept if I don't have to.
Yeah.
that this happened. I'm going, okay, got it, but how? That makes no sense to me. And you're gonna have to explain it to me.
I would also assume that the angels are male or of masculine, they have a masculine kind of vibe to them, because the Bible says they lusted after women, they lust after men, they lusted after the woman. Does that mean with 100% they're all of masculine origin, correct? Or
Well, from a biblical perspective, yes, I would say yes to that, but I would leave a crack open, and again, it could be just fallen angels creating a counterfeit and a corruption of the same story, but just as in the Ugaritic text, they want Ashtaroth to be part of recreating Rephaim as well. That's the consort of Baal. And just as Nin, which is a fertility goddess in the Sumerian text when Gilgamesh is created after the flood, 6th generation, that they believe that that's the case. I can only use that as a possibility. What I do know is you have female goddesses in the pantheon, and they seem to have the ability to take that form. And one would presume that if they wanted to do that, they could create the ovaries and the things needed to produce the giants and demigods. So I leave a small crack open for that, but certainly from what we're told within the giants that are described within the Bible, we're not told that any of the angels take a female form. That doesn't mean there aren't female forms, because the book of Zechariah has 2 female angels delivering the basket of Babylon in the end time.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
Nor did I.
again, I hold a sort of a small crack open there, and I cover that. I cover that passage off in the new book as well.
Really quick, what book was that in? The 2 female angels?
Book of Zechariah.
Okay, Zechariah.
Where they take the ephod,
Yeah.
Babylon and the woman. There's 2 female angels.
Right. I think we covered that in Revelation series. Yeah. Yeah, the 2 female angels. That was a great we'll call that segment 1. Segment 2, I wanted to bring up something that's not really talked about, and that's the linemen in the Bible. How, Gary, in your opinion, were they
I reckon they were part of
created if they were in fact lion?
They were part of the fallen angels sleeping with 200 animals.
Man, or was it a product of some kind of disease? And what does antiquity have to say about the linemen outside of the biblical canon?
Yeah, so
this guy asks great questions. I'll give him that.
Kind of goes back to the different kinds of the angels, and so we have depictions of seraphim, which are serpent-faced angels, which are watchers, and we have archangels that tend to have a single face like a human as depictions. We don't get that as a definition, but when they're always sort of depicted, but they could have a different look to them, the archangels. So we have to be careful with that one. But you also have, as part of the watchers, at the top of the hierarchy of all the 4 groups, and they would cover each of the 4 sides around the throne, and then that hierarchy goes down into the earth. So like the seraphim, for example, handle the government and the religion. So you have the seraphim at the head, and then you have the powers that are right below them, and then the angels underneath them. So they would have them as the messengers or whatever. And on the religious side, you have the seraphim at the head, and then the principalities, and then angels below that. And with the archangels, which are the warrior army angels, you have archangels at the top, you have the mighties underneath, and also you could put in the Icarus in there as well, and the soldier angels underneath. And then you have the cherubim and the Ophanim, which are looking after the thrones. Just as God has a throne of God, there's a counterfeit throne of God that Satan has, and all of the Satans have. And you have dominions and angels serving underneath that as well. And so the Ophanim are not mentioned in the Bible literally, but in an English translation, but the Book of Enoch mentions them, and they're the ones part that are in around the throne. But the Book of Ezekiel, in Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10, talks about these wheels that go around in wheels, and that goes back to the Hebrew word Gilgal. But it's also talking about these angels that have all of these eyes that are within the wheels, and one of them has the face of a cherub. They actually have 4 faces, and one of them is different.
You know what? All these eyes, like, it doesn't necessarily mean they're human eyes or whatever. They could be, you know, how peacock's feathers have got all them eyes on it. How do we know it's not like that? Because Saint John, John from Revelation, he saw the dragon, and dragon was this and that and this and that. He was actually looking at Charles's flag, his Wales flag, and that's what he saw. So it wasn't an actual dragon in the same way I just suggested the other one wasn't actual.
Because one of them is the face of a cherub. And so
we can get a deposit of up to 30% of your home cost from your super and cap interest rates at 3%.
those are the Ophanim, and those wheel beings, when it's called wheels, referring to those angels in those wheels, as opposed to the wheels, that's Ophan is the Hebrew word, and the Ophanim is the male plural. So the cherubim are warrior-like angels as well. In fact, you have angels with flaming swords that are cherubim that are posted at the gates of Eden after Adam and Eve are ostracized from the garden. And you have 4 faces that are on a cherubim as well. Now, cherubim tend to take one of those faces when they take the physical form in the physical world. So those 4 faces of a cherubim are, one is a ox or a bull, one is an eagle, one is a human, and one is a lion. So now
what the hell is God doing putting all these together like that's so weird? I wonder what he does that for.
Have these lion men of Moab that are talked about in the time of David.
Mm-hmm.
And lion goes back to the Hebrew word eri, and very much connected with at 738 and 739 is Ariel, which means a hero. And Eri is also part of the sort of the word that's connected into Aryan as well, but that's a different rabbit hole. And then you also have 740 Ariel, and you get Ariel as an angel in the occult. We don't get one of that names that's involved in the Bible, but you get the word Ariel, and that means a lion of God. Just as Michael, ending in EL, is a name of an angel. Gabriel ends in EL. Halel for Satan in Isaiah 14. Uriel, sort of EL ends up the name of an angel. So we get these.
And Israel, just for example,
linemen of Moab that are talked about as wilderness men in terms of the form as they show up with the Gadites in the Bible as well. And these Gadites are wilderness men, and that goes back to the Hebrew word Gibberim, again a word that can describe giants. So you have a being that has faces of lions that are warriors that we don't have an explanation for biblically. We do get a god that is named in the Bible who is one of the gods of that's in the Mesopotamian pantheon. And he's in the area of the Avim, the Eastern Avim, and they're a Rephaim tribe. And this god is Nergal. And Al is a transliteration of El for a god or an angel, just as Il is or Ilu is. And we see that, for example, in Baal, Lord God, as it would be understood as. And so Nergal has the face of a lion. We get accounts both before and after the flood of these lion men. And they show up on reliefs in Egypt, and they show up on reliefs in Mesopotamia. They show up in two different forms. One will have a body of a lion and the head of a human, similar to like a centaur, and other ones will have the head of a lion and the body of a man. And again, I have a great handout or a document on this for people who want to get a hold.
I wonder what their IQ was. Fallen angels, I bet it was pretty high.
Hold of me where I can you walk through it in sort of detail, just have to get a hold of me. And so you have, I think what's going on is you have these cherubim, lion-faced angels who are procreating with human females and creating offspring that would have looked just like them. And when we look at other deities and other countries, like in Egypt, you have let's say Mahis, which is a lion type of god as well, who also produced offspring. So they recorded these lions with heads and bodies on reliefs in Luxor. And they were the offspring of Mahis or Misses, which was a son of Ra or Ta. They're called by both of those names. And the word M-A in Egyptian was a word that meant lion. And again, they produced offspring. And they would have looked just
not
like
looking
them.
good, Di.
So the lion is also sort of reminiscent of a sphinx as well. You get different sphinxes around the world. Some of them have the face of a man. Some of them have a face of a lion. Some of them have a face of a bull. And some of them, like more akin to the griffins, have the face of a bird. So I think these are depictions of the cherubim gods. And we also have reliefs in Sumeria where you have the Anunnaki, which were watchers. And by the way, if people aren't sure that we can use that term watcher for the sons of God or the watchers, which are the ones who are always awake around the throat, you have in Daniel 4 times the word watcher used. And that goes back to the word Ayer, which means a watcher and to be awake. And that is the term that the book of Enoch talked about. And these watchers come from the throne of God and likely are seraphim because they're dealing with governance, just as we talked about the hierarchy before that. So you have in Sumeria, you have depictions of Anunnaki watchers who have wings and they have the face of a man, but other ones have the face of an eagle. And so if they would have taken any of those other faces, they would have produced offspring that would have looked like them as well. And what's also interesting about that notion is that we get in places like Southeast Asia, you get creatures called the Tengu, which were giant warriors and priests who were offspring of the Watchers. And they look just like them. So if you Google Tengu, you're going to bring up these eagle-faced giants. Or if you're going to go into the pulp.
When people can astral travel, they go look into the Akashic records, and that's all the information about everything. So if we can do that, the angels know everything even better.
Well, we have the Zibaba, and they were owl-faced demigods. They also had the House of Bat, which was part of them, which were bat-faced. And you Google Camazotz, you're going to get to like this uniform or this armor that Batman wears. So I think there's a sense here that following the ideology.
Man, I'd love to show up at a war wearing a Batman costume. Oh, that'd be so much fun.
That if they procreated, they would have looked just like them. It also sort of makes sense when we look at all of the kings, both before and after the flood, or at least immediately after the flood. They look just like their fathers, right? So they're serpentine. And the serpent and dragon imagery is all about the royals. And then you wonder if the cherubim took a form with their human face, was that like a dark-haired?
Baby Bunting's mid-season sale is offering 15 to 20% off selected toy brands and up to 50% off Tommy Tippy.
Hello?
Hey, did you know your everyday robot from work?
Giant. Or like a dark-haired characteristic, because Gilgamesh is depicted with dark hair. And he's also depicted as taller and larger than the Rephaim. So does that mean perhaps that the Aryans and the dark-haired giants of Mesopotamia and elsewhere, that they would have come from the cherubim versus the seraphim watcher? Again, we can only speculate on that, but it seems to me that you have these warriors, and they're not part of the governing class of the lion men, but they're part of the warrior class, and that's the only depictions we get of them. We don't get them as kings or priests.
Right.
Well, that's very interesting stuff. I just found out that my name is Ariel in Hebrew. I just wanted to put that out there. That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, maybe throw out the name that they were called in the Sumerian accounting. So you've got a few different names. The most common one would be the Alulo of Sumerian legend, and they were a lion man race. So there's no doubt that this is some sort of hybrid being as a lion man.
Right.
And they showed no mercy. They were warriors of ancient Babylon and Akkad, so post-Diluvian, just like the lion men and the lion-like men of Gad. And that they also, there's also another king that might reflect this lion-like warrior type of being. And in the War of